Well, I'm here on site, and we got the beam up. I'm standing in front of the house right now. I'm just kind of checking things out. But I think what I'm going to do first is sand this beam, which I should have done while I was on the ground. And then I'm going to do the layout for the rafters. I spent about an hour or so before I've gotten into filming here, just positioning the beam where I want, and then putting some screws in it, putting some support things, stuff like that. I might show you details of what I've done there, but it's nothing that's really film worthy in my opinion, so I just did that. But I'm gonna set you up on time lapse and you just watch me sand this beam and do some other stuff. Well, I got that sanded, and now I'm going to set it up and do the layout for these rafters. I think probably my first move is to run a string line from one end to the other, make sure it's leveled out, because there are some inconsistencies in this beam. If you saw before, we did it with a chainsaw, and so it's in and out of, I mean, maybe up to like 3/4 of an inch in the worst spots, which is, I did the best side down because I want it to look good and have a good flush face to set on the support, but it really won't matter. It'll all be covered up. It's still going to support like it's supposed to, but anytime you mill something like that with a chainsaw and a little jig, it's going to be, there's going to be some inconveniences. But I think if I run a string line, I can use that string line to gauge what each bird's mouth cut is, and you'll see more of that in a minute. But right now I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the string line up and start laying out these rafters. Okay, so it's hard to picture it. You can kind of just see that little dip. I've got a little bit of wane on top of this where there's just bark. And so I'm going to have to measure. I'm making a pattern. I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to measure for my string line. I put my string line up and it's level. There's my level. And so I'm going to have to measure each rafter to make sure that it is where it's supposed to be, because there's a little bit of deflection in the top of this in a few places. And so I'll make a pattern, set it up there, and then measure. If there's a gap, I'll use this string line as kind of my true north. If there's a gap, then I will I'll measure it and add to whatever I cut. If it's too short, then the other thing will happen. I'll measure and cut a little wider. So hope that makes sense. I'll show you and it'll make sense. So here's my template, my pattern. And remember, there's no overhang, so there's no bird's mouth on that side. On this side, this opening, this bird's mouth, if you want to call it that, will change with the beam. And so I will have my string line up above here or below it or whatever, and I'll measure from the string line to where I need to make my opening. This cut will stay relatively the same, but this one is going to move around quite a bit, and that's just what I've got to do working with beams that we've made ourselves in our backyard. So I'm gonna have to do this one at a time. It's gonna take forever. I'll probably just set up a time lapse and see how far I get before dark. this time of year. The leaves are turning. Of course, where I'm at, there's not as many. It's mostly oak trees, and they don't get as pretty. South of here, and then some other places, we've got maple trees that turn like fire red, orange, and kind of purple colors and all kinds of stuff. But I can't complain. This is pretty good scenery on this old 2-lane country road. This is about, I don't know, a quarter mile down the road. This is the neighborhood pet elk. I was talking to the neighbors, and her name is Bessie. And the sad part is I've not seen any other elk, so she might be all by her lonesome. Hi, Bessie. Isn't that crazy? Well, it rained overnight, pretty good rain. We haven't had rain here in about a month, which is nice, but it's also reminding me, because it's cold this morning, I'm wearing a sweatshirt, how much I've got to get done pretty quick, because I'm way behind on this project and I've got to get it in the dry, which just means, if you're not familiar with that term, where it's weather sealed, where it looks pretty much finished from the outside, but the inside is completely like a gutted house. Because you can't paint, you can't do exterior paint or any sort of paint below about 55, 60 degrees. And so the pressure is kind of on. But man, it's been a beautiful morning. And today, I don't have much time here today, but I think I'm going to try to finish out this episode, finish out this process, this thought, and get all of the blocking done. And we'll see about the rafter tails, but that's my goal. And so there might not be too much footage. I might set up time lapse, just kind of show you my process for cutting this in, because it's a little bit weird because of the way the joists, they're not the porch rafters, and I'll inset a picture of that right now, do not line up directly with the rafters, and so it makes it a little harder to do. But I'll show you kind of what I've been doing and explain it right now. So as you can see, and this one didn't nail down because I need to twist it where the hurricane strap is, the hardware there. The rafter, and I'm in the living room, in the main room. There's the beam. Here's the front porch. The way the porch is laid out, it's a little bit off of that. So I've got a block around this. And so what I've decided to do, this one looks better than that one, I got a gap, but is to make 2 blocks. One that's kind of a hatchet shape, Oklahoma shape, and then another one that's just a regular rectangle. And then what I'll end up doing is, when we get this to the insulation stage, is I'll put expanding foam around all the seams just to make sure that it's nice and tight. But these are kind of ugly. I'm not super happy with what's going on here, and some of them are worse than others. Just know, if you see, like that one's got a gap underneath, it'll be full of foam, and I will make sure it's nice and tight and efficient. But that's what I've got to do. It's kind of tedious work, but probably next I'm going to start right here. This is where I left off yesterday, and put a block between these to straighten out this joist, because I got this one joist that's kind of squirrely. And then I will finish it out. And I've just been screwing them down with a few screws. They just need to stay in place. They're not really structural. They're just kind of, this one's going to need that kind of thing to keep it in line, but you really just need them in place so that you have a backer to nail your exterior plywood sheeting to. And I've got to make sure that there's a good seal so we're not getting moisture and wind through that, and bugs and all the things. So anyway, that's the objective. I've got quite a few over here, and then I've got to do the whole back side. So my work's cut out for me. right, I'm on the back of the house, and I've got a whatever these things are called, rafter tail, good Lord, on this end. This is right before the little dining nook, and then the very end. And I've measured how I want them to be. In essence, they're going to follow the rake of the roof, the pitch of the roof. And what you can see there is I've got two strings, one at 12 inches. And every single one of these has a line at 12 inches all the way across. So I can line them up that way. And then one at the end. And my hope is I won't have to measure every single one because as it stands, I've been having to do that. So I've put these up there, and then I'm just gonna get to work and start placing them in. Well, that's all for this episode. I got most of what I intended up. The rest you've seen the process before, so I'm going to try my best to finish up the blocking, which I have this whole back row, but it's not as tedious as this is. It will be, well, even it won't be over there. The blocking, I've got 9 more rafter tails to go in, and then you can't see, it's just off camera, but the little dining nook, I'm going to see if I can frame in, I think it's 7. I'm going to use the same stuff as the rafter tails and the porch and frame that on its own pitch. And so once I have that, I think that I'm ready to get this part in the dry. I'm still waiting on septic, so I'm going to do my best just to focus on this spot right here. I don't know what I'll do after that, but I need to get this part in the dry. Every time it rains, it kind of degradates. Is that the word? Kind of weakens, rots out to some extent. I know that's kind of a harsh way to say it, but you can't just let OSB set out forever. And so I'm getting close to that point where it's like, you got to get this covered up. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and please like and share and subscribe.